This is The Bagel Report, a podcast exploring Jewish representation and identity in popular culture, with your hosts Esther Kostanowitz and Aaron Ben Moshe, and now a production of J, the Jewish News of Northern California.
Hey, Esther.
Hey, Aaron.
We have a guest this week.
It was so exciting to have a guest for our third episode of season 2.
And we're talking about You People, the movie that is on everybody's mind. And if it's not, it will be.
Yeah, everybody's talking about it. They're not all saying good things. They are saying things that are very, very opinionated.
Yes, people have feelings about this movie, and we love when people have feelings about things because we get to talk about them.
It leads to very robust conversation. And Aaron and I, of course, have seen the film and are preparing our reactions in a more formal way.
Yeah, and we thought the best way to give you what we thought is if we start with talking to someone who was actually there and was part of a lot of the Jewish moments of the movie. So our interview this week is with Todd Shotz, and we're so excited to have that discussion with you first. And then next week, we're going to do a deeper dive into what we thought of the movie.
You know, Todd was the Jewish consultant on the movie, and as such, he got to bring some of his friends along for the background acting ride. And as our regular listeners know, 2 of those folks were me and Aaron. And so we'll give you some background about what it was like to be on the set with Todd, and Todd will tell us a little bit more about the kinds of things that he was involved with and consulted about in this movie.
So without further ado, here is that interview.
As some of you know, Aaron and I were background actors recently in a movie. And the reason was a dude named Todd Shotz, who is the founder and executive director of Hebrew Helpers, which provides personalized Jewish learning and private b'nai mitzvah preparation. And lucky for all of us, he is our guest today. So welcome, Todd.
Hi.
To the Bagel Report.
Hi, Aaron. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Todd.
I'm so honored to finally get to be on the Bagel Report.
Oh, boy.
Wow. We're so excited to have you.
We wanted to have you on almost immediately after our experience at the Skirball, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. But we decided it probably made more sense to save you for some point at which we could headline you and you could tell us really the real deal on something that's in the zeitgeist right now that we're talking about. So, all right. So we've got a little bit of background to share with our listeners about Todd. This is my dramatic rewriting of Todd's bio. So it's going to be a little bit more interesting than your standard bio. So you're welcome. Todd is a Jewish educator, which makes sense for someone who runs something called Hebrew Helpers for sure. But he's also a film producer, and he's done the feature films The Grotto, which is now on the festival circuit and will be released this year. Mazels.
Thank you.
2016's dramatic romance situation, right?
Yeah.
Has great reviews online called Lazy Eye. And in 2019, the movie Latter-day Jew, which is a documentary about a fascinating human being named H. Allen. I was also in that movie.
Esther, you can be in every movie. Anytime you want to be in the movie, we'd love to have you. And Aaron, too. You too.
But I can only be in synagogue scenes because this is the 3rd movie I've been in, and it's 3 synagogue scenes.
Are you noticing a theme in what I'm attracted to working on?
Yes, I am. And Todd has also begun serving as a Jewish technical advisor and consultant on film and TV shows, including the Emmy-nominated series Recipe for Change. And of course, the Netflix film that was released last week called You People.
You People is a rom-com about a Jewish family and a Black Muslim family, and their 2 kids fall in love, and then it's meet the parents. And it doesn't always go as planned. And it's set in the backdrop of Los Angeles.
It's funny, the title gets such reactions from people because as we've been surfing the social media unbelievable wave as the movie has been released. One of my mother's friends said, I always despised that expression, you people. And I wrote back to her. I didn't write back to anyone, I didn't write back to everyone, but I wrote back to her and said, it's actually kind of the point, right? Is that it's supposed to get a reaction from you. It's supposed to evoke a sense of otherness that the movie is trying to call out and hopefully bring some coming together, right? So it's trying to call out the otherness. And I think it does a good job of that. Now, granted, I did not write the movie. I did not produce the movie. There are plenty of things that I will take full, creative, that I had major creative involvement in. This movie was not. This movie, as Esther, as you said, I was brought on as the Jewish technical advisor by the lead producer, Kevin Misher, who I know through Penn alumni stuff, through our university organization. And I also taught his kids. And so when he was putting this movie together, he called me and said, we need some expert advice. And so I was thrilled that he called me.
And we're really glad to talk to you about it because we've seen the movie over a week ago. We all saw it in theaters. And now the world is seeing it on Netflix. And this week, it is the #1 movie on Netflix. Not only has it made the top 10, it is the #1 movie. So people are seeing it and they are having extreme feelings about it. And I think that's one of the best things creative people can get from a movie is that no one saw this movie. Oh no, everyone saw this movie. Oh my gosh. Okay. People are seeing what we've put out there. And so we're so excited to talk to you to see which parts you kind of saw the behind the scenes, the making ofs.
And helped shape. Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's start from the beginning maybe. So
I was born in Philadelphia. Raised in a conservative Jewish synagogue called AJ.
That's on here.
Park.
No.
I love that.
Philadelphia is on here. Aaron, go ahead.
So in the beginning, after God created all the things, right? So you are growing up in your Jewish community. And was there ever something that you felt seen in popular culture where you saw that and you went, oh, that's me? Or maybe you didn't.
I mean, I'm really dating myself here, but I remember how obsessed we were with the movie The Jazz Singer, the Neil Diamond remake of The Jazz Singer. Aaron's looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I know. I know. I'm with you. I'm familiar.
And there were so many things about that movie. I mean, of course, Neil Diamond was the top of the charts I don't even know what year that movie is, in the early 80s, I guess. And just, this idea of the balance between he was a trained cantor, he was a trained chazan, and following in the footsteps of his father, and then wanting to break out onto his own to become a popular singer. And that he's dating someone who's not Jewish, and Lucy Arnaz, and just I remember so much about how even as kids we would talk to our parents about that. There are so many examples of where Jewish representation is. It's just why didn't they ask someone? Just ask, and I think it may have been because there were so many Jewish writers and producers already on set. Not to be too stereotypical, but there are a lot of Jewish people involved in Hollywood. Big shocker. I know I've just shocked all your listeners. It was almost an assumed that everybody would just know what was the correct Hebrew pronunciation or what was appropriate for a certain sect within Judaism. And it wasn't necessarily the case. And so I was so thrilled that they were asking me to help them figure out what was going to be accurate based on the characters, based on the situation, and based on the overall arc of the movie.
I'm wondering also, music is a very big influence for you, and Broadway is a very big influence for you. And so, it's funny that you said The Jazz Singer, Neil Diamond, that music has been kind of like an entry point for you. And I'm wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about how Broadway and your theater experience really fits into the person who Todd Shotz became out here in LA.
Well, so I moved to New York right after I'd lived in Israel for an entire year. I was on Project Otzma, volunteering for the entire year. And so I came back and I was wanted to work on Broadway. So I got a job working first with a theater owning organization, and then with a production company where I was a company manager on individual shows. I loved my work on Broadway. It was incredible. I was involved in so many great productions, from the revival of Kiss Me Kate in 2000 that won a whole bunch of Tony Awards, to Tom Stoppard's The Real Thing, which also won a bunch of Tony Awards. I worked with Liza Minnelli. I worked with Kenny Rogers, Jimmy Buffett. And I sort of got to work with a lot of my heroes as far as playwrights. And it was great. But at the same time, I was living in New York City and I didn't have a lot of money, especially since I was working all during the day in the office and then going to the shows at night and living in Manhattan. And so I started teaching bar and bat mitzvah preparation at the New Shul, which was a brand new synagogue down in Greenwich Village. And so my whole life was sort of straddled between these two worlds of entertainment and Jewish education, almost within the first year that I was living in New York. And so I would teach on Sunday morning and teach a whole bunch of students, and then run to the matinee, and then teach my other students in the late afternoon on Sunday. And then during the week, they knew what, like on Mondays was our day off for the shows. And so I would get in as many students as I could after school. And so after a while, it was an insane life, but it was very fulfilling for both of my main interests, both entertainment and Jewish learning. And so when I came out to LA, I wanted to go and work in the film business. I'd been on the road with a Broadway show for a year, and left my whole practice to my friends in New York. And then I came out to LA, and I went to go work for Bruce Willis's production company. And but I was still teaching bar mitzvah. And so I was teaching bar mitzvah on Sundays, and then working in the film business the rest of the week. And then, of course, eCar started, right? And so eCar, which all of us on this podcast are involved in, Rabbi Sharon Brous, who's married to one of my childhood friends, David Light, had told me that they were starting this new community, and would I be interested in helping to form the bar mitzvah program? And that's where Hebrew Helpers sort of came to be, because eCar wasn't set up yet to be hiring all these teachers and sending everyone all over the place. And Sharon actually said to me, maybe you should start something. And we know that Rabbi Sharon Brous always has great ideas. And so I really ran with it. And that's where Hebrew Helpers started to come to fruition, where I was hiring other teachers. So it makes perfect sense that I would now be working in Jewish technical advising because of all my work in Jewish learning. And then I was working full-time in film and TV as well. So
I had no idea that eCar was that formative in like the origin story of Hebrew Helpers, but that tracks. It really does track.
Well, we started in-house, but it was still its own company. And then I was working mostly with eCar students, but then so many people were calling me from outside of eCar. And we were also helping Neshuva with Rabbi Naomi Levy. We were helping Valley Outreach Synagogue with Cantor, now Rabbi and Cantor, Ron Lee Paz out in the Valley. And so I was hiring all these people and training people. And meanwhile, working on Hostage with Bruce Willis and Die Hard 4, like all these things that I was working on during the week. And so, yeah, so it's always been an amazing adventure. Every week, people say, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? I'm like, I can't even explain it. I'm working on my film stuff. I'm working on my management of Hebrew Helpers, as well as teaching my own students.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hey, Esther, LA may be all abuzz because of the Oscar nominations, but in San Francisco, the Jewish Film Institute is gearing up to present the 10th annual Winterfest, February 25th and 26th at the Vogue Theater.
The weekend-long festival showcases 9 documentaries and narratives from local and international filmmakers that offer a kaleidoscopic view of Jewish life and culture.
So join JFI for 2 exciting days of local premieres, community conversations, and contenders for international awards.
You can get your tickets, passes, and film information at jfi.org/winterfest.
And now back to the Bagel Report. So you're doing this for a very long time. And then this little movie with these 2 up-and-coming filmmakers, Kenya Barris and Jonah Hill, little scrappy indie guys. They say, hey, we're doing this movie and we want you to be involved. How did that conversation come to be? Because you also knew people already from school who were involved in the project.
I didn't know Jonah or Kenya at all. I, of course, am very familiar with their work.
Yeah.
Especially Jonah. I'm just followed his entire career. And of course, they're always proud. You know, it's, isn't that true? Like we always claim like he's Jewish, you know what I'm saying? Like we were always like Jonah Feldstein, you know, like, And of course, his sister's wonderful career too, Beanie Feldstein.
Right.
And so I didn't know either of them, but Kevin Misher, who is the producer of the movie, who has produced tons of movies, and he is such a dear person to me. And he knew that they needed some outside consultation just to make sure, and it was very important to him, as it was to Kenya Barris, to make sure that it was very accurate as far as the Jewish representation, especially in the synagogue scene, starring Esther and Aaron.
That's how they referred to it on set, right? They're like,
exactly.
The one starring Esther and Aaron, and that lady Emily as well.
My sister-in-law also is on the Bima with Esther. So they call you call each other something. Can we say it?
Bima babes.
Bima babes.
Bima babes.
Yeah.
Okay, Bima babes. Okay.
It doesn't sound feminist, but it is.
So Kevin came to me and said, and actually at the time I was working on the Grotto. So I was on set for the Grotto and I get a call from Kevin saying, we really need your help in this. And I was close with him. I taught his eldest son and soon I'm going to be teaching his next son. We had that close connection to each other. And so he knew that I could come in. And also because of my familiarity with being on set, it would be kind of seamless rather than bringing in, say, a member of the clergy or a professor from a university who's completely unfamiliar, especially since we were making this during the time of COVID. Right. So this when I was brought in, it was the end of September, 2021. So it was right on the cusp of, I think it was like the Delta, like that we were right in the middle of that. And also I was working on my film, The Grotto, with writer-director Joanna Gleason, which I was so thrilled to get to work on her directorial debut, who, of course, I met her at ICAR through her sister, Sharon Hall. Joanna made a beautiful film as her directorial debut. So I'm on set for that. And at the same time, Kevin's calling me and I want to help him, of course. And it's what a cool opportunity to play that role and the Jewish technical advisor. And immediately he says, can I give out your phone number? And so meaning to the production designer, the art director, the set dressers, the costume designer, the costume crew, the whole wardrobe crew, to the props people, to the location manager, to the casting director who was dealing with the background casting. All of a sudden, my phone is ringing off the hook. Meanwhile, I'm on set for 12 hours a day in downtown LA where we were shooting The Grotto. And so what we didn't say is at the same time that all of this is happening, I get a call from the head of YouTube Originals to work on Recipe for Change, which is a series that was produced by LeBron James's company, Spring Hill, in conjunction with YouTube Originals. And they were calling me to see if I could be a consulting producer on the one episode of the 3 episodes that they were doing that was called Recipe for Change, Standing Up to Anti-Semitism. And it was all about celebrating Jewish identity as well as addressing the cause of combating anti-Semitism. So that episode is out. People can watch it. It's on YouTube. I'm so proud of it. It aired right before Passover in 2022. And now it's kind of fun. We've been showing it at film festivals. We just showed it at the TNEC International Film Festival and had a great
There's a TNEC International Film Festival?
There is a TNEC International Film Festival run by my dear
There wasn't when I lived in Bergen County. We didn't have international film festivals in Bergen County.
I credit my dear friend Jeremy Lentz, who's the director of the festival. So all of these things were going on at the same time. And I'm getting calls. And so I don't remember who it was. If it was either from props or from wardrobe, said to us, we need those scarf things. What are those scarf things? And they meant it with every positive intention. Like they meant it in a really loving way of we want to make sure, because we've seen that in services. We've done a lot of research. They had done tons of research about what the synagogue should look like and what people should be wearing. And I even consulted on what color the suits should be for both the lead cast and the background that they gave costumes to, about what would be appropriate in a service like this. Now, at ICAR, our services, everybody's, wearing white and it's different. This was more supposed to be a Reform synagogue that is using the Skirball Center for its overflow service. You know what I'm saying? Because it would be so many more people attending on Yom Kippur. So I
have a little set story of costumes.
Oh, please.
So as as we said, Aaron and I were background actors. So after Todd made the determinations of what the background actors should be wearing, we had to fulfill that from our own wardrobe, which is pretty standard, I think, for most background players. Is like you should come with a couple of outfits, and then the costume designer will look at that and tell you yes or no. And so I wore this black dress that I've worn a bunch of times to Jewish functions. I think I wore it to some JQ brunch a while back, and like it's modest, nothing really wrong with it. And they looked at me and they're like, "You do know this is a synagogue scene?" And I was like, "Yes. I do. And I have been to synagogue many times before." And they're like, "Well, people don't dress like that for synagogue." And I'm like, "All right, well, how about these pants and this shirt?"
Oh, they gave you
pants.
They gave you clothing to wear? I didn't know that.
No. I had my own pants and clothing with me as an alternative. And it actually turned out to be for the better, because I didn't know then that I was going to end up on the bima. And on the bima, the skirt would have been too short. But
wait, how did you get up on the bima? How did this happen?
Well, I paid a guy.
Yeah, right.
I knew it.
So again, time of COVID, right? So the way film sets work is that there are different zones. At least this is the way it was in 2021. There were different zones about who could go where on the set based on, and everybody was tested. And Esther, I think you and Erin, you had to test. Do you remember the protocols? It was really intense.
Yeah, we had a test the day before, but I took a rapid test that morning. I showed them my negative, and then we did another one, and we showed up at I think 4:35 in the morning, and people were just like getting shuttled from place to place. And they were giving people costumes if the clothing they came in wasn't good enough. And I was like, wow, it's a real operation here for shul, for services.
But again, I really point to that it was a priority for the producers and for the director to make sure that it really felt authentic, right? So, and a friend, I was at IKAR last night for Hillel Tigay's Palm Stations album release.
Yeah.
And a friend came up and said that he was watching the movie having no idea that I'd worked on it. And he said, "Oh, they got the Yom Kippur scene right." And his wife turned to him and said, "It's Todd. Todd worked on this." You know what I'm saying? And so I took that as, it was like the biggest compliment that I've gotten this entire time, right? That somebody watching it took in the fact that it felt like an authentic Yom Kippur service for a reform or reconstructionist, that kind of service. I'm still kind of smiling about that he didn't know that I had worked on it.
It's such a funny thing because that scene is, I think, the first scene, the second scene in the movie. And it's only for 4 or 5 minutes max. But even being there, one of my favorite things you said, and I don't even know if you said it, but I watched you do it. You were going around and handing out kippahs to people, yarmulkes to different people, saying you can't have this, unless you're a family, you cannot have the same guy wearing the same kippah, because no one would do that unless you were at a wedding or a bar mitzvah. And I thought, thank you. That is the coolest. You're right. It's a pride thing. It's an individuality thing that people bring their talit and they bring their kippah that they got from here or there. And they wouldn't be wearing the same one unless you were supposed to.
And you'll remember in the dialogue, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, the character of Shelley, scolds Ezra, Jonah Hill, for not having his yarmulke. He wasn't just going to get one in the back. You didn't bring your yarmulke. Where is your yarmulke? Right? So there's some yarmulke that makes sense. There was a kippah that was that he wore to services, right? It was interesting because we did get the scarf things. But I brought every talit that I own to set because I wanted to make sure that there were some ones that felt not like the ones that we borrowed from Stephen S. Wise, right? So there were ones that, that are in the drawer at most synagogues, right? And so I wanted to make sure that it was peppered throughout, that there were different, at least where the camera was going to be really close up around the lead cast in that amazing conversation. They cut a lot out of that conversation. I don't know if we were close because there was really racy dialogue that ended up. And I think it was funny when we were watching the monitor afterwards. I was with so the rabbi is Amy Bernstein from Kilat Israel. She was the rabbi giving the sermon, and then Kenner Chaim Frankel was the one who was leading the vidui. And he actually is then somehow the rabbi at the end who's doing the wedding, but nobody questions that. We were listening to the dialogue and of course we were all like, oh my gosh, like we're doing a Yom Kippur service and they're saying these curse words, you know. But what was so great about the final scene was it felt inappropriate because that's why it was funny and that's why it got everybody's attention in the opening of the movie. But it wasn't so far that you felt like it was disrespectful to the proceedings of the day. Right. And so I think they actually did a really good job of that in the movie, of like pushing it just so far so that the movie would ultimately be a conversation starter and would evoke reactions out of people without people literally, like, I can't imagine people are walking out of the theater or like just shutting it off Netflix, because it keeps you going the whole time. Again, I didn't write it. I didn't produce it, but it feels really cool that I got to be a part of this, especially since that day. Really, I'm still pinching myself about how epic that day is. When I walked in and all those conversations and because I wasn't allowed really there until we showed up for our call time. I'm sorry to tell you guys, my call time was 5:15.
I know, you told me. You weren't sorry to tell me. You were gloating to tell me. But
you know what? We were parking at the Leo Beck Temple parking lot, which is the holding area. And then we were shuttled up to the Skirball.
Yeah.
Some people actually parked up at the Skirball as well, depending on what your call time was. And then, maybe they shuttled you down from the Skirball and then back. I don't know what you guys had to do, but it was really cool. I got to my trailer and I go in and I have my own little trailer, and on the door it says Rabbi number 2. Which I've been joking that I should like write a book called "You May Call Me Rabbi Number 2."
Right.
I love that.
Right.
Coming to anywhere
what
books
happens?
are sold.
What happens when Rabbi number 2 does Mambo number 5? That's what I want to know. Is that math? Is that
too much math for this late in the evening. But anyway, so Erin, thank you for remembering that. We were talking about the zones, right? So that all of the background actors were kept in that enormous room at the Skirball. And if you remember, everybody's chairs were set like many feet apart from each other. Do you remember this?
It
was really very strange to walk in and see all these people sitting, nobody really talking to each other because you were too far away, everybody on their phones and everybody in masks. I was not in a mask. Do you remember what I was having to wear?
Yes, you had the face shield. It looked like a welder's hat, but like it was.
I liked
totally
it. It was
clear.
a look. We should bring that to services. I don't know.
I looked like I was a dog coming back from the vet with the big cone in front of my head, but it was clear.
Yeah.
And it would go around the neck, and it was so that the makeup and the hair that they had done on me wouldn't get messed up. And if you remember that every time we did a take, everybody had to take off their masks.
And what was crazy is everyone had to have pockets. Everyone had to figure out where were they going to put their mask, because this was a no COVID film. It wasn't like it existed. So everyone's like stuffing their shirts for one take and then taking it back out. It was crazy.
So I actually went through, it's interesting, when I go through my office sometimes, I keep so many kippot from all these different bar mitzvahs. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do with them. And so I went through all the kippot that I wanted to keep. I literally was sitting on the set of the grotto going through kippot because the wardrobe person was going to swing by the set of the grotto to pick up all of the kippot from me that I had, because I wanted ones from all different, because people collect them from bar mitzvahs. So so someone would have the green suede one and the blue suede one, and somebody would have with the silver trim, and and someone would have the nylon and all that kind of. Somebody just got it, picked one up, So I really tried to make sure it was very varied.
Oh my God, what a great idea for like a secondhand yarmulke store. You could call it Find His Keepas. And
But
okay,
but like seriously.
Bam
copyright.
You should register that URL. You register that URL immediately.
Wow.
The domain is yours.
Anyway, like a thrift store for like all of the old yarmulkes from different mitzvah. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So when I get into the extras room, to the background actors, if you remember, the second AD introduced me. He was really great. He kept everybody sort of going. If you remember, he was really very respectful to everybody. I think he was Jewish himself, and he really wanted to make sure that everybody felt like they were going to synagogue kind of feel. And then he said that I was going to pick, I think, what did he say? Like 8 people or something like that would be put in key positions. And so, of course, I picked some of my friends, I needed 2 people on the bima. So I picked Esther and my sister-in-law, Emily. And then also I was looking for certain looks. We wanted some older actors. And there was one man who actually brought his own talit with him, Because I think in the breakdown, which is what we call when you're advertising for actors to come in for something, in the breakdown, it said, if you can bring your own yarmulke and talit, please do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some people who showed up. So there was this one older actor who showed up and he was literally sitting there in the extras room with his talit on and his kippah. He was like ready to go. I'm like, you are on the bima. You know what I'm saying? Like, he looked perfect. Yeah. He looked like he was like one of the donors from the synagogue who was being honored on Yom Kippur with getting to, sit next to the cantor or whatever. Esther, you sent me a photo from that moment where I was teaching the 200 some people that were in that room, the vidui, the confessional prayer to be.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Talk about that, because that was a very strange moment as a Jewish person who also kind of just did this, because we were shooting in the fall. So we had already just done this for real, right? And then we're standing there doing it again with a group of people, half of whom were not Jewish, maybe more than half. And they're like, okay, what do we do? How do we put please talk about what that moment was like. You had to teach. It wasn't just a Shabbat service. It was Yom Kippur. And you had to teach a room of people what the vidui was.
Right. So if you remember, I gave a brief explanation of what the prayer was and that they weren't supposed to actually hurt themselves. I think I said that it was supposed to be a light tap of their fist over their heart. But if you remember, they were supposed to be mouthing, but no sound. Do you remember? So, which is very strange for anyone to be going through something and they're just mouthing words that many of them had no idea what it was supposed to be. We did hand out sheets, if you remember. There were little lyric sheets. And so we went through it with everyone. And as we do, you have this great picture that you sent me of me standing there with that ridiculous cone mask thing. And I've got my hand on with my fists and I'm showing everyone. I want to cut to what was going on in the principal cast holding room, right? So behind the bima was an entire enormous, what we call a green room, right? Where the actors are waiting. And everybody had their chairs, right? So Julia Louis-Dreyfus had her chair, but her chair said Shelley, right? It said the characters' names. Jonah Hill said Jonah Hill. Everybody else had their character names. And so they're all there. And immediately, and I walk in, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who is one of the great comedic actresses of our time, who is a legend, who luckily I have met her before. Her best friend from college, I did her daughter's bat mitzvah.
Naturally.
So I have actually done the hora with Julia Louis-Dreyfus at a bat mitzvah before.
She didn't do the Elaine. She didn't do the Elaine dance.
That would have been amazing. She basically was like, I need your help because I've never really been to a Yom Kippur service. Now, it's interesting. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is from a Jewish family, but only on one side, right? And it's interesting. David Duchovny, who plays her husband, his father was also a prominent Jewish person. He was. I want to say he was the editor of the Forward or something like that. His father, Duchovny,
something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what was amazing about David was he was showing me. So we had the whole day together, right? So I'm back there with them in the principal room most of the time. And so waiting for the different shots to be set up. And so David's showing me all of these pictures on his phone of his father and of the Fovitz. He's even saying it like in the Yiddish, showing me all these things and talking about how proud he was to actually be playing a Jewish character because he values so much the legacy of his father. It was really very moving to me. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus, so she comes up and says she wants to know exactly how to do this with her fist. And she's asking me about, does she look right? It felt very warm back there. And everybody was really trying to help each other to really make this a very authentic scene.
It's very Hamish. So the way you're speaking about Julia Louis-Dreyfus and David Duchovny and their Jewish heritage, which has not been a major driving force maybe in their careers, but they know it's part of their makeup. And I'm just, this is one of the things that we talk about here on the Bagel Report is about Jewish representation on screen. And so one of the, there's obviously a big conversation about whether you need to cast Jews in Jewish roles, but one of my working theories is that if you do cast Jews in Jewish roles, that also helps to deepen their Jewish understanding and Jewish connection. A part of the benefit of casting Jews in Jewish roles is that they get to kind of look at the tradition that is part of them, whether or not they're observant. It's not really the issue, like that they can see the meaning in their own heritage. So I really like that. And I'm really glad you shared those stories with us. And I'm glad that those were their experiences as well.
I definitely feel we're constantly struggling with that in casting because I do so much casting in all the other projects that I'm working on. We often talk about it with LGBTQ plus casting, like whether the actor needs to identify exactly as the character's gender or sexual orientation, like whether that needs to be exact match or not, right? And whether, and so that I think we're dealing with that a lot. I mean, Sarah Silverman, please, has been so outspoken about Jewish casting and all that stuff. But I agree with you. I think that everybody that was on the set that day, and you saw how much crew there was there. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there. And everyone was involved in creating a synagogue scene that felt authentic. Most of the wardrobe crew, most of the dressers, almost definitely all the props people, most people did not grow up with a Jewish background, and they were going to get it right. I noticed that Kenya the director often talked to the background actors in a pretty collaborative way, because the background actors in that scene make the scene, right? Because otherwise you just have actors standing in a group of people and you don't feel the sense, because if we don't feel some of the decorum of the Yom Kippur service, it doesn't play as funny for the principal cast in that hilarious dialogue, right? It would not have been funny enough, I don't think, if the background hadn't been in the decorum that you expect from a Yom Kippur service.
Another question about how you looked at the script, whether you were only designated for the scene or if you had a chance to give input on the script overall, what you controlled, what you couldn't control, what you may have, spoken up in support of or in opposition to. Like, those are things that I know that our audience would love to know about.
So I wasn't in control of anything, right? So I'm, as a consultant or as an advisor, it's a balance. Like, I had to be very, this was not my movie. I'm not the director. I'm not the writer. I'm not the producers, right? And so in order to be heard, there's also an enormous amount of mutual respect. Like, I had such respect for what they were trying to accomplish, right? So I didn't have much control over it, but they did send me the script ahead of time, which with Netflix projects, it's literally like, it was watermarked with my name. It was like I had a piece of gold, you know what I'm saying? And I had to guard it with my life. And I think I even had to log in with a password to download the script. And so I did read the entire script. I was only asked to weigh in on 2 major scenes, which makes sense. They needed me to talk about the Yom Kippur scene, and they needed me to talk about the scene in which Rhea Perlman speaks in Yiddish. I did a lot of the staging up on the bima, which Kenya was so gracious. The director, I talked to him about it. He came to me and said, what do you think should be happening up on, like, who should cross when, where, based on what would be authentic? And there were even times when I wasn't in the shot that he invited me to come and stand next to him so that I could see what it looked like based on what he was hoping to achieve. And in the Yiddish scene, I spent a lot of time sitting next to him because we were trying to get the lines right and all that. There was a lot of talk about whether the ark should be open, whether it should be closed, when it should be closed, right? And so we were, and luckily I also had an ordained cantor and an ordained rabbi up there with me. But I was the one who was the liaison between going to, if you remember, the amazing AD. The AD, assistant director, runs the entire set. And so I was interfacing with him and Kenya, the director, and the second AD who was in charge of the background actors, and trying to do all of that while coaching. And I sat for a long time and I helped Rabbi Amy Bernstein to script what sermon she was giving. Now, she was mostly ad-libbing. She's an unbelievable orator, just really, really gifted. And so we just talked basically, and if you notice the sermon that she's giving, which I know nobody will catch it in this little glimpse, that little snippet that you hear, she is talking about acceptance of the other. That's what she's talking about, right?
Can you talk a little bit about the Yiddish scene?
I was glad that Kevin Misher, in that great article that's in JTA, and it was syndicated by so many different papers, and all my friends writing me, they mentioned Hebrew Helpers, He mentions that there was a Yiddish scene that was cut out of the movie. You do see a moment of it when they're at the rehearsal dinner. you see where Bubby and Shelley, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, come up to talk to the couple who are sitting at sort of the couple's table at that beautiful scene with the water falling behind them. The idea is that, and the way it was scripted, is that Rhea Perlman, Bubby, has not met the bride-to-be, right? She hasn't met her. And so Shelley is saying, they're walking around the room. And Bubby says, this is beautiful. Look what you've done here. It's a beautiful rehearsal dinner. And so then they're walking up and she basically says, I want a gin and tonic. She almost like tries to order a gin and tonic from them because they're sitting at that high table and she doesn't realize that she's meeting the fiance. But I was literally getting calls round the clock the night before this was shooting with changes and changes and changes and changes to the scene. And I'm on the phone with Rhea Perlman. I was sitting right here at my place, like talking to her and she's saying, I want to say this or I'm going to say that. And I had Sarah Benor, who we all know from Ikar.
Yeah.
I had her recording Yiddish. And at one point when we got the original line, we actually had like a bona fide Bubby in Yiddish, recorded it. But then the line changed at 10 p.m. the night before we're shooting the next morning.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm on the phone with Kevin at 10 p.m. He says, we changed the line. Can you translate this one? So I'm texting Sarah. I get Sarah at like 8 o'clock in the morning. She makes her own recording of it. I'm in Rhea's trailer with her and she's just the sweetest. And she was offering me like a butterscotch candy or something. And I was like, you really are a Bubby, you know?
Wow. That's beautiful.
She was so gracious. She like asked me to come to the car with her, you know, like in her car up to the set. And we get to the set of the rehearsal dinner and we're all outside and Julia comes right over to me and she says, Todd, I want to speak in Yiddish too. And I went, okay. Just, so you know, Julia, I don't speak Yiddish. I'm going to coach everybody and I know how it should sound. But what do you want to say? And she says, well, my mother says this line. I want to say like, quiet, mommy, you know, like quiet, you know? And I was like, okay, so you would say like, shush still, you know, or something, you know? And so,
exactly.
Right. And so like, there's some Yiddish that I know, but it's not I speak Hebrew, you know, Hebrew is my thing, you know? So and so then, but Rhea says, well, I have to say something back. And so I said, okay, well, what do you want to say back? And she says, don't tell me to be quiet, kind of thing. And then Julia says, well, I want to have the last word. And Rhea is so cute. She goes, of course you want to have the last word. Like they were talking like they were mother and daughter. And it was unbelievable how they just working with two legends. Anyway, so she wants to say something back. And she basically says, enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God.
Enough. It's like enough.
Yeah.
Enough.
But I don't know how to say any of the things after shush still. Like that's literally all I know. You know, so I call Sarah. Thank God she took my call the whole day. I mean, I told her that I needed her to be nearby, you know.
Yiddish expert on call. Yeah.
Exactly. And we got her a credit. I was so thrilled. I saw that. They agreed to a credit for Yiddish consultant, even though the scene got cut. So Sarah is telling me, and I go back, and that I forgot to say that I kept going back and they kept adding lines. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going back and forth. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh. So, it's an episode of Seinfeld in and of itself.
No, so then I put Sarah on speaker so she can do the whole dialogue herself. And so I was like, Sarah, you're on with Julia and Rhea. You know what I'm saying? And she had no idea what was happening. You know what I'm saying? And so then she tells them the whole dialogue. They say it back and forth for her. And she says, you got it. And then great. So then we go in to shoot the scene. And Kenya's like, so what did you guys come up with? And I was like, well, we wrote a scene. Is that okay? I mean, is this okay? And he says, fantastic. I mean, when you hire, they know it. When you hire comedic genius actresses, right? You like, let them do their thing, you know, of course with direction, but like, let them do their business. They know what they're doing. And so they shoot the scene. And by the time we finish shooting the scene, Kenya knows the entire Yiddish dialogue by heart. When Rhea goes up on a line, he's yelling it out to her and saying like, nah, shush still, whatever, you know, like he's
my gosh.
It was amazing. We didn't know by the time the Yiddish scene was going to happen, whether it was going to be actually shot or not, you know? And so it just goes to the nature of the movie making and TV shooting, like all this kind of stuff. It's so collaborative and it's so creative and it's all a work in progress, right? So we always say that you write the movie on the page, then you're rewriting as you're shooting, and then you completely rewrite the movie in editorial, right? So like the movie that I read where I had to type in the password is not the movie that Esther and I sat next to each other, like, you know, watching in the movie theater. But also you can see the clear choices in order to evoke a reaction out of everyone at the same time. And Kevin brings this up in the article that was in JTA. It also has to work for the characters, right? So it's not just, if it was just on a soapbox, nobody would be interested in this movie, right? If it was just preaching harmony between, the races, harmony between faiths, harmony between all that, I don't think people would be talking about it, right? But the fact that it's getting the strong reaction, I think, Aaron, you just said this earlier, it's getting a strong reaction. That's what artists dream of, to get that kind of participation from the audience.
Aaron and I are going to get into like our review of the film, I think, next week, because we just have too much to say. We had too much to say to you. We had too much. Well,
and also you were in it, so it's a different thing,
Yeah.
Wait, Esther, you've been in other movies, right? We're Keeping the Faith, right?
I was in the Yom Kippur scene and Keeping the Faith, so I'm a bit of a ringer.
Wait, we have to give a call out to Andrea Hendler, who was also in that scene.
One of the things I'm seeing online is that there's just a lot of criticism of, either not going far enough or it going too far. And I feel like when you get those kinds of reactions at the same time, when you get people saying, oh, it was a silly little movie, or no, it was a really important movie, or it was a great rom-com, or it was a mediocre rom-com, and so as long as you're getting all of those responses, I think you're creating something that's part of the culture, to use a term that they use in the movie. What they mean it in terms of Black culture and fashion, hip hop culture. I think, I'm not hip, so I don't know. But the reality is that you're creating something that sticks with somebody, and they make their own calculations of what it is and what it achieves. And then, of course, they've argued with anybody who doesn't believe them or doesn't agree with them. So I guess congratulations to you.
To the producers and the producers, director. Because Jonah and Kenya wrote it together, and so right. It really was supposed to be from a Jewish perspective and from an African-American perspective, and trying to bring that authenticity. And my hope is that in my role, it was just to make sure that what I knew of creating a Yom Kippur service would be authentic, And it was amazing. Last night when I was out in our community, one person came up to me and said, "Congratulations on the film and everything. And I don't think it went far enough." And I was like, I appreciate you saying that. Again, it's a piece of art. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a movie, right? So everyone's going to accept it in a different way. It's going to bring up things for them and about their own lives. We hope that, right? And then somebody else came up to me and says, "I thought it was the perfect blend of comedy with enough issues, but we weren't hit over the head." I was like, "Oh, great, thank you." I like that it's making people talk, right? Like that we're all talking about this, right? It's not just another action movie that is not bringing up these crucial conversations. Even though I love action movies, don't get me wrong, love action movies. But I think that there aren't that many of these movies that are getting made that are being put into the theaters. And so it's really great that it had this run in the theaters as well. And it's interesting. I think it's different. We saw it, all three of us saw it with an audience. Right? And so there's a collective experience. And I'm so worried for the movie business a bit. Do you know what I'm saying? That most people are taking in their movies only by streaming. And they were missing some of that communal experience that is so much a part of the American, sort of way of life in Hollywood. And I loved it that there was such a diverse. Do you remember the audience, Esther? It was all, you can't even know, there was all different people that were there. And we were all laughing together. And there were even little, things like people letting out a little gasp or whatever when something just felt so uncomfortable that I think people will miss if they're just watching on Netflix. My parents were telling me that they were having another couple over and they were going to watch it together. I'm like, good, it should
watch it with people
in a group of people.
It's interesting you say that because a couple people have already reached out to us telling us how they felt about the movie, and a couple people have told us that they've turned it off X amount way through. And it's so interesting because we all saw it in a movie theater with very different, it wasn't just like a group of our friends. Everyone looked different when they were in the theater, sitting there, laughing, gasping, whatever. And we didn't leave. No one walked out. We all just sat there, watched the movie, got up and left. And there is something different than being able to turn it off and just sitting and taking it in for what it is. And so if you're listening and you're not sure about watching the movie, we recommend that you watch the movie before you have opinions about it. And also try and watch it all the way through. And if it's cringy, good, right? Sit in the discomfort, right? That's a very now thing to say. So sit in it and, keep listening.
And write your own version that's better. If you
right,
don't like it, write the better one. I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions and then we have to go because, we could talk to you forever and we have to set a limit at some point.
This is not a 3-hour episode? What do you mean?
I know. I did do a 2-hour episode about the Fablemans on somebody else's podcast, but
oh, wow.
we don't really do 2-hour episodes here. It's not really our thing. Okay. So this is kind of like this is a theoretical, but based on also your experience with Hebrew Helpers, because I know that you have worked on so many B'nai Mitzvah. You probably have a number. Was it 300?
Oh, no, it's many, many, many more than that. Like when we had our 13th birthday party, we were already up well over 600. So wow, that's so many. I mean, Wendy Jackler will tell you, the managing director, she will tell you, our dear friend, I think we did 132 last year, bar and bat mitzvah services. And we pride ourselves that each one is personalized and different from the next, and that we really meet that family and bring our knowledge of the tradition and life cycle event ritual kind of stuff. And we put it together and we create something that's unique for that family. Of course, still following sort of a traditional template of a service and including the major prayers and Torah reading. But where are ways in which we can personalize it? And people walk out going, wow, like this was not like a bar mitzvah that I've ever been to.
Right. And to that point, I'm glad that you said all that because it was part of the question. But I'm just presuming that like you've dealt with families in which two sides of the family don't get along or have different influences. And so I'm wondering if the Cohens came to you for B'nai Mitzvah advice for Ezra and Amira's kids, how would you advise that their marking of this coming of age incorporates both/all parts of their identity? Is that something that you feel like you would have the answer to?
Well, we do lots and lots of bar and bat mitzvah services for families that the parents have different backgrounds from different heritages, different races, and I think often they are coming to us because maybe there was a synagogue community that they've been involved in where they didn't feel completely accepted. Of course, there's so many synagogue communities that are super open and inclusive, but there's families out there that haven't felt that level of inclusion. And so if they can create something unique for their family, we can really help them. If there are ways in which we can educate and familiarize the parent who didn't grow up with a Jewish background and make them feel included as much as possible without making them feel uncomfortable, we really have to balance that. And I coach my other mentors on what are ways in which, like if the Jewish parent is going to do the Torah blessings and the Aliyah in Hebrew, is there a translation, even a poetic translation? We often have parents both parents are Jewish, but one of them really doesn't want the word God to be mentioned. I mean, we have so many different requests that come in about like, how can we make this like our family so that they feel a connection to what they're doing. It's a celebration of their family and the rite of passage of that individual student. And so we'll often say like, there are plenty of times where we'll have a reading or a song or even an inspirational reading during a silent meditation. Is there something from their background that we could incorporate? And we also are really careful about our translations into English in our prayer booklets, that there's no gender for God. You know what I'm saying? Like, we really try to like make it so that anyone reading it can really tap into what resonates with them in the service. Because I always say that even though it is for this one family and it is for this one student, you're bringing together your community of family and friends, and it should be something for everyone to come out with feeling rejuvenated, having learned something, having enjoyed, laughed, cried. Everybody should be moved in some way for having been a part of it. So if I were talking to Ezra and Amira and we were trying to craft something that felt right for their family, I would talk to Amira about her background and in the Nation of Islam. And are there places in which we overlap that we could incorporate, whether it would be a text or a piece of liturgy or a song, whatever it would be, that would still feel organic to what was going on. Again, I think that's also the balance the movie tries to make, right? It's like, how do we acknowledge our differences, embrace our similarities, but not lose ourselves in the process when we come together?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for being so eloquent in that. And we're almost done. How can people find you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to see what you're up to? Where can people find you?
So I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Todd Shotz. But then Hebrew Helpers, HebrewHelpers.com. Hebrew Helpers is on Instagram. It's on Facebook. I wanted to say that we're burning the midnight oil here on our podcast. And I actually have to, when we get off, I have to go and record a Torah portion for an actor in a major ABC television show who is having to recite a Torah portion, and they keep changing the date of when this episode is shooting. So I'm so thrilled to but I'm so thrilled to be able to get to do more of this kind of work, because I really do think that one of the, people say, well, why is Jewish representation in the media so important? And that it be authentic. Why is that so important? And I really think that as people become more familiar with Jewish ritual and practice and Hebrew and all of that it does build bridges between these communities, right? And so often people fear what they don't know. And so then if it's out there in the media and it is done in a way that Jewish people see themselves and feel some sense of kinship with what they see on the screen, as well as for people who are uninformed about Jewish practice, they will feel a connection to the material and ultimately a connection to other people.
Todd, thank you so much for being with us. You're awesome. And it was a thrill talking to you about this movie. We've been waiting for this so long.
I know.
Oh my God, so long.
It's finally here. Hooray. The last question that we ask everybody is, what kind of bagel would you be if you were a bagel? Or if you don't identify as a bagel, what is your bagel order?
What is my bagel order? Well, I love whitefish salad. Love it. And so, of course, like my friends who did not grow up with a Jewish background are like, whitefish salad, but those of us who grew up on it. So my bagel order is sesame bagel, toasted, whitefish salad, fresh tomato, and black pepper on top.
Yum.
We're hungry.
You wanted to know.
We did.
That's right.
Thanks for telling us. This has been The Bagel Report, a production of Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, and a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Thank you to Lev Gringaz, our producer from Jew Folk Inc., David A.M. Walensky and Andrew Essenston, and Danny Lipsky for creating our logo. You can find us wherever podcasts are listened to. Connect with us on social, on Twitter, at Esther K., at Eben Moshe, and at The Bagel Report, on Instagram at Esther Kostanowitz, at Eben Moshe, and TBR the Pod, and by emailing us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. Now go and watch something interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it next time on The Bagel Report.